Sam Altman, for most of his life, controlled what each room got to know about him. Then, over 18 months, those rooms stopped asking for his permission. First it was his board, then Elon Musk, and then his sister. Each one of them did not ask his permission before they started going after him. And that was just the beginning. Sam Altman was born in 1985 in the Midwest to a very competitive family. He had 2 brothers and a sister. After dinner, they would play games such as billiards or tennis, cards, what have you. And the 3 boys would play water polo. That was not unlike my upbringing in a suburb of New York City. I was also the oldest. I was also part of 3 brothers. And we were a highly competitive family, but more in the intellectual space than in, say, business or sports or athletics. This is the kind of household that creates hyperachievers, those who are never satisfied with what they have, but also are constantly trying to achieve greatness and seem to overcome incredible hurdles. Then at age 8, his parents gave him a computer, and that changed his life. He was totally in control, master of the universe, because he was able to use it almost immediately. And that started a chain of events that made him feel untouchable, like anything he could do was perfect. Sam Altman was gay before he was willing to let the rooms know that. Very much my story as well. I came out when I was 19. He came out a little bit earlier. But I came out at a time that was turbulent, the 60s and the 70s. It was also the time of sexual liberation, but it was also a time when my generation had to fight many of the wars that paved the way to allow somebody like Sam Altman to rise through the ranks, become a CEO fairly early in his career. We had Tim Cook and Peter Thiel, but it wasn't really until the aughts that it really became acceptable or not unusual for an openly gay man to be a leader in business. Sam Altman was born in a period where, therefore, being gay, at least for most of society, was less of an issue than it had been in my generation. Now, he carried with him a lot of artifacts, a lot of the typical shame and concern and confusion that a young gay man has. And so when he came out, it was a big deal for him. It was difficult. It was opening the door to a room he had kept control of for at least 15, 16 years. However, and this was the case of many men who come out early in life, his biggest fears were unwarranted. In fact, you can say his coming out was a triumph. As one of his teachers said, it changed the school forever. And that was great. For a gay man to have that kind of positive reinforcement is awesome. However, in the case of Sam Altman, it had a downside. It meant that, yet again, anything he touched turned into gold, even when he was confronting his worst fears. That was going to come to haunt him several years later. Have you ever taken a huge risk in your life and then see that it actually resulted in a triumph? If so, please write about it in the comments section. I would like to start a dialogue with you. So here's a simple truth about being gay. Even today, we learn as gay men very early how to hide and how to construct masks as a way to ensure that we present a face that society can accept. We have mainstreamed ourselves. And Sam Altman is no exception. By the time he was running OpenAI, he had created a mask of humbleness, of thoughtfulness, intellectual and so forth, the typical mask that a successful CEO in Silicon Valley cultivates. However, underneath it all was someone who was anything but humble or not aware of his power. I had built a similar mask, albeit not in the technology field, but more in consulting. The problem with that mask and that hiding is that you have less and less respect for authority because you seem to know it all. And that extended to his board. He probably did not respect the sort of stewardship that a board represents, the sort of corporatization of an entrepreneurial spirit. And he probably had a lot of things the board did not like. Or, as they said later, they thought he wasn't being candid. So he was hiding behind the mask and hiding certain things that he just did not want to share with the board because he probably didn't have a respect for them. And again, the board turned on him and fired him. So as Sam Altman became more powerful, this way of arguing two sides of the coin, which can look like hypocrisy, really came back to haunt him. He had never had room starting to compare notes about him. So for example, in the regulatory world, in Congress, he argued for greater oversight of this industry while lobbying against it in Europe. So that began the unraveling of his narrative. First, it was the board that then turned around 5 days later and reinstated him, which again confirmed in his mind that everything he touched could be turned around and was golden. Then Elon Musk's lawsuit kicked in, accusing him of turning a charitable organization into a profit-making one, which was against the spirit of what they had planned and had counted on. The judge and the jury dismissed it, however, not on the merits of the case, but because of statute of limitations. And then finally, the third room opened up, and that was when his sister accused him of sexual misconduct in a case that was never settled and for which we have very little information. I'm not going to opine on what happened there, but suffice it to say that every family has its quirks and its secrets. And that came back to haunt him. And finally, with these three things out there and the rooms totally open, the general public started going after him. And there are hundreds of YouTube videos that point the finger at all sorts of things that people felt was complicitous, was not correct, morally unjustified, and hypocritical. And at that point, he had lost control of his rooms and the narrative that was being spoken in the rooms. So this is where Sam Altman stands now. He has opened several rooms and lost control of the narrative. But we also have seen that he can come back, as many of the great entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley can. But he's going to have to come back a more mature man. He's going to have to learn from this experience. He's going to have to understand that he needs to stay in control of the narrative and not necessarily grant permission to others. And that is something that a mature CEO has to understand. Now, the question for you is, do you see something like this in your own life? Have you lost control of your narrative, and how did you fix it? And why suddenly were you allowing people or giving people permission to run away with your story and say either half-truths or to lie, or make up stories, or indeed suddenly you had put something out there that was true, that was not exactly seen as favorable? And how are you going to handle that? Because remember, history favors the bold. So here's the final question for you. Do you have a room that you're either trying to control, or are you earning its trust? If so, please write it down in the comments below. And if you'd like to book a time to speak with me, it is a free consultation. Please click the link below to my website, and you'll see a button there that you can use to book a time.